So I'm going to present for about 30 minutes, and then I'll leave the last 5 minutes for any questions and any questions you may have. My name is Patrick Matthews. I'm Assistant Professor in the Centre for Deaf Studies here in Trinity. We're actually a little bit off campus. We're down in Leinster, just in Leinster Street. Beautiful building it is altogether. It's really nice, actually. I'm going to sign in ISL, obviously because it's my first language, being deaf. And the interpreter, Pauline there, qualified interpreter, will interpret and translate, Pauline McMahon, and will translate into English. And then we have Patrice. So as Patrice is actually a trainee interpreter, so she's here to observe today. So we're dealing with two languages here, ISL, Irish Sign Language, and then that's, as I say, being translated into English. Because obviously if I signed and had no interpreters, it wasn't translated into English, you wouldn't understand anything. Okay? Or do you want me just to sign? Are you okay? Maybe I don't need the interpreter at all. What do you think? Which would you prefer? So maybe give her the interpreter, if you know sign, you see, I can give the interpreter a break. Maybe we'll do that. I have a PowerPoint here, a PowerPoint presentation, but to be honest, I don't know if I'm going to be using it so much. I think I'm quite flexible in the way I lecture, so if you have any questions during the lecture, don't be afraid to put up your hand and let me know. So we have a four-year degree programme here in the Centre for Deaf Studies. And the Centre for Deaf Studies, the CDS, was set up in 2001, so it's about 13 years now, actually. Before it was a 2-year degree or diploma programme, and now obviously now it's a 4-year degree programme. In fact, we had our first cohort of graduates this year, so we're all very happy and proud of them. And now they're going to have the second cohort this year, or in this academic year, graduating. I'm going to just mention a few different things in the lecture. I'm going to speak about ISL, Irish Sign Language, the deaf community and culture and what that means, and what the language means to that culture, and why all that connected, what has to do with the course that we're offering in the Centre for Deaf Studies. You know, the prospectus that you probably all have at this stage. I think, to be honest, for the requirements, entry requirements, everything is, all the information is there, so I don't think I'm going to go into any of that today. So you apply through the CAO, or maybe if you don't have enough points, if you have some form of disability, you can actually go through different programs, for example, like DARE, D-A-R-E. We have, in the Centre for Deaf Studies, we have a limit of 20 places, and we have 6 members of staff, full-time members of staff. And then we're with the CLCS, another department in Trinity here, and we work together very closely with them. So from the CAO, the Centre for Deaf Studies accept 15 places, or students from them, and then we have 5 reserved places for mature and, as I say, disability students as well. And of course, you know the deadline is the 1st of February. So the 4-year degree programme, for the first 2 years of that, actually, all of the students, no matter which strands they're interested in, will be taught together. So some of the modules that we go through are sign linguistics. So that really is analysis of the actual sign itself, how it works, the structure of sign language, facial expressions, what that has to do with the actual language. It's like, you know, if you're like in a white coat, like a lab, and you're analysing and breaking down all these kind of structure of the language. Another module that we have in the first 2 years is what they refer to as POD, so Perspective on Deafness. So understand the variation that deaf people have in regards to their the way they were brought up, the way they were educated. So everyone has different backgrounds, whether they were maybe educated mainstream, through mainstream schools, through deaf schools, whether some have maybe cochlear implants, and so on. So that's all through POD, that module. So their everyday life, basically. Of course, you learn ISL, Irish Sign Language. And then just to kind of clarify on that point as well, you see the word Irish there. So a lot of people get confused and think it's connected to the Irish language, but it's not. It's nothing to do with the Irish language or with spoken English. It's a totally separate, independent language. And if you're referring and you say something like sign language, it's a very general term. It can be any sign language from any country in the world. Because sign language is not international. A lot of people get confused. A lot of people are very disappointed when they realise it's actually not international. So really, there's reasons why there's a lot of history involved in that. But we won't go through that because it's very boring. So then Irish Sign Language is an indigenous language of the Irish deaf community here in Ireland. For example, in Northern Ireland, they use two different sign languages, BSL, British Sign Language, and ISL, Irish Sign Language. So the UK is likewise uses BSL. In France they use LSF, America ASL, American Sign Language. And the reason being because it's linked to the history of the country and the deaf community in those individual countries. The Irish Sign Language really was taught in a Catholic school, around the 1800s. And then if you were talking about the Protestant school, they were taught or were signing BSL, British Sign Language, so they're more Protestant based, obviously. But of course, time has changed since then. There is a thing now, you can't say it was referred to as international language, that a sign language that is used perhaps at conferences or in different events that maybe happen worldwide. If we're travelling, if deaf people you have to have some reason to be together, they will use international sign because they don't know the indigenous language of the people there. So in ISL, actually, we have 77 different hand shapes. So in other words, how they represent different signs. We have different categories. This is one category. This is one particular category of a particular shape. So even the sign itself means that something's good. Yeah? So this is your first lesson in ISL. So it's easy. So it can also be used for the vocabulary nothing. Or if you're referring to someone or something that's famous. So you can say if it's used for famous. See, it's this particular hand shape. So that's one hand shape. There's a variation of that then, like this. So that can be pronoun, like for mine, if something is possessive. They can use for the vocabulary meat. Can you see in the back, by the way? Oh, by the way, can you hear the interpreter, actually? Because I'm afraid the interpreter has a bit of a cold, so I'm not sure if her voice is strong enough. Can you hear all right at the back? I don't want you to be worried. We have a backup here. We'll use a second voice here if the voice breaks down. She has plenty of water now, but just to make sure she's clear. And if not, if you tell me you can't hear, I can up the volume on her somehow. So that's the second hand shape, and here's another variation of that hand shape in that particular category. So, like, when you look at that, what do you think it could represent? It could be a cigarette. Yeah, very good. A cigarette lighter. I'm very impressed. Or it can be like, if you're clicking the top of a pen. And then if you move that thumb there to the front of the fingers, it can be for a saw or a hammer. So these are the different hand shapes that you use for different nouns and nouns and verbs. So there's 77 different hand shapes. It's a lot, really, when you think about it. Because we use, obviously, sign naturally, so we don't even think about actual hand shapes, but it was through research then that these were kind of pinpointed. So we're speaking about the hands and the sign. It's not just the hands, it's actually, there's what we refer to as a signing space. or signing frame. So it's not just about the hand. Linked with the linguistics of the language is the facial expressions, how you use your face, change the meaning of signs. And it's very important to have eye contact, actually, in ISL is one of the extremely important parts of ISL. You know, because sometimes you can sign something, but the meaning changes because your facial expressions are different. You can change from maybe... I'll pick actually just a very simple example. Like if maybe you're asking someone, would you like a cup of tea? So this is the sign for tea. Would you like, that's like, and this is the pronoun for you. Because you know as well, another integral part of sign language is actually the pointing, particularly for pronouns. I know it's quite rude in general, in society in general, but it's actually part of the structure of ISL and sign language in general. So you talk about yourself, I, you, I, we, you know, you is in plural. So, and it's linked with placement in the real world kind of placements. You know, if you're describing as to where something is and so on. So then how you move your eyebrows is also an important part of ISL. It's a simple example as to how ISL, like how facial expressions and how you use body parts is like if you move, if your eyebrows are raised, is actually you're asking a question. So normally then the response is either a yes or no to a question like, would you like a cup of tea? So I'm going to ask them not to say anything. I want you to look at my face and the difference. Mind you, I'm not sure if it's bright enough with the lights. So. Okay, so you can see the facial expressions and how I move my eyebrows. So a person obviously will understand that very quickly. So to have the same sign but a different facial expression now, I'll show you. Can you see the difference? Yeah? I hope you saw the difference anyway. The second is that their brows are more furrowed rather than raised. Like almost if you're worried about something or obsessed about something, you're kind of more, you know, would you like a cup of tea? So it's kind of like this. So if a person's been asked the question, they'll probably say, no, thank you, because it looks like you're not too happy in asking me that question. So that's to do with facial expressions and how it can change the meaning. And I'm wondering, why does everyone always refuse me a cup of tea? I don't know, maybe they don't like my tea or something. And then often it is because of the facial expressions. That's just a very simple example. But the sign, like what there's actually signing on your hand is the same, but the tone and manner is completely different and changed by how you maybe even blink or use your eyebrows, use your cheeks, movement of the head, whether it be back and forth. It all has actually meaning in some form or another in ISL. So if you're surprised, you say that the body tends to move back actually if something is, or shocked, you kind of go, really? And so it's really, you know, it actually changes meaning as to how all these components are used. I suppose in spoken languages, like the intonation of the voice, the facial expressions will be kind of similar to that. So in English, obviously, the structure is very linear, whereas when sign is all encompassing, actually, you actually encompass an awful lot of meaning in just a couple of signs. And as you learn sign, that actually you will appreciate that more and more. If you look at different sign languages, if you compare the various ones maybe around the world, you know, like this is the vocabulary for car, it's kind of universal in that sense. But the actual handshake, what represents the car, what makes it into a verb, it could be a bus, maybe it can be a bike as well. It depends on the context. A plane would have a different hand shape. This is actually a plane. See, the hand shape is different to represent that if you're landing or you're going a certain direction. And so this is more a vehicle, really, this hand shape. So, you know, you have a car, and then this is how it changes into the verb, because you're actually doing the movement. But you can have, like, it's not just, I mentioned about even the facial expression, how that's linked to what you're signing. You know, maybe perhaps if the road is smooth, if it's rough, you'll know by your facial expressions, or if you're, you know, you're relaxed, you're taking a stroll, like a drive somewhere, you'll know that by your facial expressions and how that changes. So like if you're driving along, I'm okay for time, and then thinking, oh no, it's actually time, I'm really in a hurry now, is to see how you change your facial expressions and movements change. So this is the handshake that we use in ISL here in Ireland. The UK uses the same handshake, but it's actually different, what they say, orientation. So they have it lying down rather than standing up, so to speak. Whereas we go in here in Ireland, we do this. So maybe if you're talking about maybe cars being parked, so you've got multiple cars parked, so this is how you would sign that. And it's placements where they are actually parked. In sign language, you don't really have to say that, oh, you know, they were in a row, they were under, they were over. So it's very linear in this sense, and you have to explain, whereas with sign language, it's actually automatic. So if the traffic was backed up, then this is how you would sign it. It's quite clear. And that is if they're parked in a row. The UK, as I say, would be like this. So in ASL, American Sign Language, their handshapes like this. And why, I don't know. It looks like a what do you call that? Sorry, a crocodile. Sorry, I couldn't get the vocabulary. Looks like a crocodile. I don't know why. It would be like this. But anyway, that's their hand shape. And then in Portugal, in the sign language, in Portuguese sign language class, this is the hand shape. As to why? No reason or rhyme. Maybe they have little bubble cars or something over there. I'm not really sure. That's the Portuguese. I did meet a Portuguese deaf person before and say, why you like that? Like, she says, like, try, because they're not hand shapes that we would use. And you're thinking, really, to get your fingers like that is really hard work. She says, well, that's the way it is. I mean, try it yourself, you'll see it. It's not that easy. Like, can you try it? Have a look. Yeah. So that's the Portuguese. In Ireland, it's much more simple. It's just like this. And America is like this. So they're different hand shapes for the same vocabulary. Although similar, they are different at the same time. So that's a little about the linguistics of ISL. So then who uses ISL? It tends to be obviously deaf people, deaf members of family members. Some people who work with deaf people in different organisations perhaps. Like some professions like interpreters, social workers. Maybe people who work in admin, or like deaf organisations, like there's one called Deaf Here, the Irish Deaf Society, and so on. Then teachers. Really what our course offers are the three different strands: the ISL teaching, the interpreter strand, so translating from ISL into English or the reverse. And you would maybe perhaps interpret in different, maybe medical area, conferencing, court, and so on. So you find that the interpreters have to know, skills in different areas. Of course, not saying that they know everything in all areas. It would be too hard for that to be the case. But they would have to have a certain amount of signing, skills, particularly, depending, and knowledge of the area as well. And then there's other circumstances, maybe in interviews, parent meetings, and then obviously very serious circumstances, maybe in court, medical area. So there's a lot of areas that interpreters work in. So if we're talking about another strand, the ISL teaching strand, they're obviously teaching ISL, like myself. So you're teaching people, anyone obviously who's learning to sign, how to communicate in that way. You know, people have various reasons why they learn, maybe for work, for family. Then we have a general deaf study strand. You can work with deaf children, work in deaf organisations. So there are the 3 strands that are offered by the Centre for Deaf Studies. So you have to see what jobs maybe you would suit yourself. You know, because ISL is a very visual language. You'll find deaf people's, like, their peripheral vision is very wide. And I mean, of course, you, like yourselves, you can see, you know what's in the environment, but you'll find that deaf people are even more so in tune with that. Because maybe yourselves, you rely on sound every day. You know, and if it's some noise around you, that can be quite annoying for you. But for us, we've got visual noise. And what I mean by that is by maybe people moving too much or being restless. To us, that's visual noise. So people are moving their head all the time or scratching their head, or for us, that's noise. All that continual movement. Because normally when there's movement, like especially in a signing environment or a deaf-friendly environment, if there's movement, it's normally to say something or to express something. And so when you keep moving, then you keep seeing what the person about to say. In classroom, where you sit in semicircles, and then this is a deaf-friendly environment because everyone can see each other signing. Like, say, if we're stuck maybe somewhere like now, but say one of you wanted to say something and wanted to sign something, well, what you would have to do is come downstairs, come down to the podium or to the front stage, and then you would sign what you want so that everyone sees. It's different from spoken language. You just give a microphone around and you're away in a hack. But with this, and there's difference. You have to come down and sign so everyone sees it. And this is a deaf-friendly environment. And you'll find deaf people prefer round tables, actually. Because again, for the same purpose, that everyone can see all the conversation that's going on. Whereas if it's more of a long, oblong kind of a table, then they have to move and see what's happening and miss conversation. So like if there's ever plans for weddings or whatever, the deaf person will always try to arrange for round tables. And then you'll find as well, like, you know, we have the romantic candles here everywhere in all these places. We don't like it. We have to move it because all the flickering kills us. It's too much movement for us. So then, you know, sometimes you move the candle, the waiter goes and puts it back, and we go, no, we want it away, get out of it. Get it out of the way. This is obviously they're not very romantic. So, and then, you know, if we like to have clear light, a good lighting as well, because so we can see the conversation well. You know, sometimes you see Christmas lights and they're flashing. They're very annoying if they're continually flashing. Whereas if they just stay on, or maybe if they're softer in the way they come on and off, it's easier. Whereas if you know some of them are quite flashy, they come on and off quite quickly. So it's these are all visual noises for us. And then likewise, how do you get the attention of a deaf person? Well, it's different from what you're used to. You would tap someone on the shoulders, perhaps, like Pat's doing now. Or perhaps say someone is at a bit of a distance, you would maybe just try and grab their attention by waving your hands. And then again, because of the deaf-friendly environment, then deaf people particularly will move or respond to that very quickly. But say the person didn't notice and can't, or maybe it's a wrong person, maybe looks up, then you do like a domino effect, and you would ask actually then, would you get that person's attention for me? And we'll kind of go around the room like that. But of course it does depend on the situation. If you just want one person's attention quietly, or you're talking about maybe if there's like something like this now, if it's, as I say, the one person would be quieter, you do it low, like Pat's doing it there, you kind of do a discreet wave. Or if there's loads of people, this is how you would wave people if you want to grab their attention for a lecture or for whatever reason, if there's a lot of people. So there's different movements for different types of attention. Or sometimes you can tap the floor, especially if it's a wooden floor. A deaf person will feel the vibrations. If it's concrete or something, obviously, then it's not so much the case. But if it's soft wood or a table, if the person's body's in contact with the table, then likewise you can just tap So like this. But if obviously if they're not touching the table, they won't feel. But if you tap it at the table like that, they'll actually feel the vibrations immediately. So they'll see what you want. And usually respond pretty quick. Or sometimes we want to know, a lot of people's attention, lights, put the lights on and off, or just people in general, just put the overhead lights on. And, you know, or if you're upstairs, maybe, sorry, Pat, if someone's upstairs and you put the lights on and off and they know you want them, they'll come downstairs. So there's different ways and different ideas that deaf people would use. Because as well, you don't want to just, you're just trying to get one person and everyone in the room turns around, and you know, so you have to know which form to use and under which circumstances. I think the time's kind of running out. I don't know if there's any questions. There's only about 5 minutes left. Anybody have any questions about anything? It doesn't matter. So yourself? So, if you don't mind, maybe the other person behind first, actually. There's a woman in the red jumper.
Do you happen to have any prior knowledge when you start?
No, because you can come in without any sign language if you're speaking about sign language in general. So that's why the 4 years you will learn all that when you're there. So it's quite intense teaching for that. So, but we have students who have sign, but we have some who have absolutely none. Does that answer your question? Next person.
I was wondering, you mentioned about you used to only do a 2-year course and now you're doing 4 years. Is the option open yet, or will it be soon to do a master's?
Yes, there is plans to do a master. You know, because our diploma was very successful. Now the degree program has been very successful. As I say, we just recently had the first cohort of students, and so yeah, it is a plan for the future to be able to do that. I know clinical speech are offering that, but we're not at that stage just yet. But it is there are plans in the future to roll that out. Anyone else? Yourself?
What's linguistics exactly?
Really, it's to study the structure of the language and how the language works, basically. You know, like it's like with English, you're talking about verbs, the grammars. You know when you're if you're talking about a spoken language, how you use verbs and when you use pronouns and so on. So really, the linguistics is basically the same, but with ISL.
And is it very science orientated, or is it just very English?
Well, to be honest with you, you can't study linguistics if you go into the real, in-depth linguistics in 4 years. You'd need a lot longer. But yeah, it's just to give you a basic understanding of how the language works. For example, I explained to you about the hand shapes there. That's part of linguistics. So it explains things like that. So, and then as you're learning it, then obviously it's important when you're learning the language to know how the structure works. And then why you need facial expressions, and then what the meaning that it has with the sign language, just even that little bit there. So that's really linguistics, actually. So we teach you ISL in the MySL module, but then as well, it's really the linguistics are in support of you learning the language, actually, so you understand what you're learning. Any other questions? Yourself at the back. No, it's full time at the moment only, actually, unfortunately. Okay. Any other questions? I hope you understood the interpreter. Because we can blame the interpreter if you didn't understand. And her voice is okay, you were able to, it was clear, you could hear? And did it match me? I'm just wondering, did it give the same? I hope she may captured my personality for you. So you can tell me if she did or not. Because you know there are variation actually in interpreters, just speaking about that area. Because some interpreters are good, but they won't necessarily match the person that's signing. So I particularly work with this interpreter, so because I know I like working with her, and so I know she matches my personality quite well. So, but this is not always the case when you're working with different interpreters. And then she knows the subject fairly well, so that also helps. But sometimes if people are replaced, then it works well, and sometimes it doesn't work well, unfortunately, actually. Okay, so we're happy enough. We're finished. Oh, sorry, there's one more question there. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
What kind of prayers would be open to you from doing the course?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said prayers. I'm sorry. I don't know if it's maybe if something if you're like involved in like in the interpreter, as I say, that's obviously interpreting job is one career that you can aim for if you like, but it is a lot of academic work there, and then there's also more everyday stuff for interviews and different things like that. So that's the interpreting career. So when you finish, you've graduated, then you would kind of work through an agency, and they would give you jobs, through the agency. So that's the interpreting aspect. And then teaching, yes, there's you're teaching the language as well, of course. Like you are basically a teacher, so yeah, there's jobs there for that as well. Down the back.
Is all the lectures with an interpreter or part of action?
For the first 2 years, yes, we have interpreters for signed, because obviously you don't have any signing skills. After 2 years, when you move to the third year, there's no interpreter as such. Maybe the odd time there might be some, depending on who's lecturing. So, but by that stage, your signing ability should be fairly good, and so you'll be able to understand what's happening. So, and definitely by fourth year. So that, yeah. So for the first 2 years, yes. So this is a fourth-year student. Maybe if you want outside, you can ask her some questions actually, and she'd explain exactly how her experience has been. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I think at the other time. One more. Okay, we'll do one more then.
Do you only learn ISL, or can you learn like ESL? Is there interest to travel with the student?
Yeah, well, obviously we focus on ISL, but if you wanted something like BSL, you would have to go to different courses. But at the same time, we do have exchange programs, and we have people coming over to us from different countries and who have their own national sign. And then sometimes you, and then likewise, you can go over. We at the moment, like for example, we have 2 Finnish people, we have 3 Belgium, and I think 2 from America. So we have a lot of exchange programs going on. So they're actually learning ISL when they're here. And then for this year we have the Erasmus programs, so that 2 of our students have gone to Belgium actually to learn their sign language. So you have that option there. I think I better go, but you can ask me questions outside or at the table.